Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate on the second and final day of a referendum on a constitution that rolls back changes made under the now banned Muslim Brotherhood. We're talking about a path that, in all likelihood, could lead to a presidential run by the head of the army, General al-Sisi. With us to talk about it from Cairo, Yasmin Farouk, who was an advisor under two governments since the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak. She teaches political science at Cairo University. Economist Mohamed Elalfy is with us, as is anti-coup activist Moed Harb. Thank you for being with us. And from Oxford University, Eugene Rogan, author of The Arabs. Islamists, this referendum, we talked in part one about how it's a plebiscite on the Muslim Brotherhood. It's also, to a certain degree, you might say, a plebiscite on political Islam. Islamists themselves divided. The Salafist Al-Noor party calling for a yes vote.
The referendum will not only involve voting on constitutional articles, but on the roadmap as a whole. The Al-Noor party was there since the beginning, took part in the Constituent Assembly, gave its opinion and heard other opinions. It realized the seriousness of the current situation and understood the potential gravity of Egypt's future. We also see that moving away from the constitutional amendments would lead to chaos. All these factors affected the Al-Noor party's position, and we can confirm that not only are we saying yes, but we hope that all Egyptians would also vote yes.
Eugene Rogan, how do you explain this divide among Islamists?
Well, I think Hizb ut-Noor has been a very pragmatic party, to put it mildly, all along, and they recognize realities as they now stand. An Islamist party that stands against the military faces the future of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hizb ut-Noor is one of the newcomers to Cairo's or Egypt's political since the revolution, and I think its meteoric rise is largely attributable to the very generous funding it's received from Saudi Arabia, which has also put its money behind the new regime in Egypt. So why would Hizb ut-Noor take a line that would alienate Egypt's new rulers and its own parties funding Saudi Arabia? And I think in that sense, we could only have expected them to make the kind of fulsome endorsement that they've made for the referendum today.
All right, so there's benefactors, Eugene Rogan, there are tactical alliances, but beyond that, how do Islamists feel about the role of religion in politics? Is there also a divide on that issue within Egypt?
Certainly, but we've really learned since 2011 that there are many different political tendencies that we could brand under Islamism, and the split that emerged between Salafists like Hizb ut-Noor and the sort of more centrist Muslim Brotherhood already revealed fault lines that made it really Islamists in collective ways. I think that you have very different political agendas, and Hizb ut-Noor, the Salafis, hope that they will be able to take a leading role in shaping the social agenda in an Egypt that will once again be under military rulers.
A social agenda, that's an important point. The Muslim Brotherhood, it's not just them that have been driven underground. The assets of Islamic charities have been frozen. Authorities say they're often used to fund militant activities. Now, for instance, one Cairo hospital saying that it's running out of money.
This association serves all the sectors of the Egyptian people. If the state closes these hospitals or puts restrictions on them, then they must provide the services themselves. But I can't see the state doing that.
Your thoughts on this, Mohamed Elalfy, with the state closing down or freezing the assets of charities that run hospitals, that do what Eugene Rogan described, that are so involved in the social agenda of Egypt. Can the government, can the military pick up the slack?
The problem now, it's we can say phrasing, but controlling all these charities, organizations, because to control the fund came from everywhere to this. If serving the people, it's okay, but if using all these charities organization to use it as a laundry for dirty money came from everywhere over the world, to use it later against Egyptians, like what we are doing to finance the terrorist of this terrorist group and the member of this terrorist group to kill people and to put bombs everywhere inside Egypt. So, of course, we must put it under control of the government to control and to see. And most of them is still providing the services to the people now.
But you've just heard from Eugene Rogan how the Salafists, who are urging yes in this vote, yes, they have funding from outside, from Saudi Arabia.
The problem not about the money. The money came from Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or UK or France. The problem in money, how you will use this money. That is the main problem. Okay. Sometimes some charity organizations get funded from France. Is that a problem? Not a problem at all. But the problem is how to use this money. You are using really to serve people, or to use this money to work against people inside the country. That is number one. Number two, when Eugene said from UK that is get money from Saudi Arabia. Okay, Morsi regime was taking money from Turkey, from Qatar, from the International Organization of Muslim Brotherhood. That is not a big problem. The problem is, what are you doing by this money? That is number one. Number two, when Salafis said yes, they said yes because they don't have a foreign agenda, they have national agenda, agree with the Egyptian people. And second, third point I would like to answer about it, when Yasmin Farouk said it's a Mubarak businessman. No one, we can't call anyone this Mubarak businessman, this Sadat businessman, others Nasser businessman. It's Egyptian businessman. And yesterday and today, the Egyptian stock market has achieved $1 billion, and today $1 billion. And the next, within few hours, the US Congress is heading tonight to lift the ban on military aid to Egypt, to return back the full relation with Egypt. That is tonight.
Right. And as we're saying, a polarized debate and polarized as well among viewers, radical justice saying a yes to this referendum is a no to any chance of democracy in Egypt. Yasmin Farouk, is that the case? Is a yes to this referendum a no to any chance of democracy in Egypt?
No, I strongly disagree because, the Constitution has never been the benchmark, as we saw in 2012. The way the Muslim Brotherhood in 2012 were marketing the yes for their Constitution, okay, which was on the substance not that bad, actually, is the same as what is done right now. However, it did not stop the crowds from taking to the streets on the 30th of June to say no to the Brotherhood, who were actually deviating from the path of the 25th of January revolution. So no, let the Constitution pass. It is not about the Constitution. It's about what's going to happen after the Constitution. Who is going to govern this country? Whether the public institutions, the state institutions will be rebuilt, whether there will be free and fair elections, whether the repression by the Ministry of Interior will diminish or not, whether the civil movements will be able to organize themselves to form powerful political parties or not in order to mobilize people on the ground. Now, these are the stakes, but the Constitution may very well be the first step. You have people who once were amongst the ranks of what is called the revolutionaries, or those who took to the streets on the 25th of January 2011, and who are right now working with the militaries because they are saying that by adopting the Constitution, by institutionalizing new rights and by adopting new laws, this is how you are going to impose transition towards democracy, to impose the respect of rights and freedoms. So let's start by here. And we cannot just condemn this path. This may be actually a viable path. So what is at stake here is not a yes or no to the Constitution. It is what are we going to do after the Constitution.
All right. We have another viewer weighing in. The 2013 Egypt Constitution seeks at every chance to place the president, the military, the judiciary above elected civilian oversight. Mohamed Harb.
Yes, firstly, I will thank Mr. Mohamed Elalfy not to interrupt my speech. Secondly, I agree with which was said by Mr. Eugene Rogan, 100%. First of all, the Salafists are like caution for the military regime. They're using them. They have only one seat in this constitution. Secondly, which is most important, we are talking about details today. I am telling you very easily, what's happening today is cheap and basic propaganda for democracy. We see, if we don't see it, it's quite difficult. But the first principle is what is invalid and built on an invalid basis will always keep on an invalid structure. If you have a wrong basement, the whole building is wrong. Today, what we saw today is not about the constitution. Even if in the constitution there are like very weird acts, like the armed forces, military forces will choose their own.
So you don't take Yasmin Farouk's point that there's what's on paper, but it's up to people to keep politicians honest.
I agree with Yasmin, of course, only because she said that the constitution 2012 has been removed. Yes, by the people. Yes, I totally agree. But the problem is that in 2012, the regime was not as strong as today. We see clearly today that we have the three forces, the three main core forces in Egypt: the justice, the police, and the military. They are like strangling Egypt like this. They are the one who built this constitution. So to move this constitution is not like moving the Muslim Brotherhood constitution of 2012. Do you understand the difference? You have a big regime behind this constitution. So to move it, actually, it's not about the constitution. But moving the constitution is moving a regime. So today, if you want to move the 2014 constitution, you will have to move the military. That's so easy. And I don't agree with Yasmin, because taking out the military is what we asked in the first place in 25th of January, and we didn't succeed. Today, 6th of April, and the communists, they're also in prison, and we are waiting to see what will happen.
Mohamed Elalfy, it's true that the word that's been often employed for Egypt is this notion of what they call the deep state. That is to say, it's not just the military, but it's people around the military who have their hands in business interests and in certain prominent posts, and that this was what was supposed to go with the ouster of Mubarak, and it hasn't.
Yeah. By the way, is this what this expression about what you said now?
The deep state.
The deep state. It's created and published by Muslim Brotherhood.
By Muslims Brotherhood. I can't believe it. That's not
okay.
me.
It's okay.
I'm sorry, but this man,
okay.
He doesn't watch TV.
Let me say.
He doesn't watch TV.
Okay, let me say. But and they would like to let the people believe that there is a deep state playing in the future. That is not true. They used to publish lies all over the world.
We don't need to believe
also in 2000, under the regime of Muslim Brotherhood.
Really?
The Brotherhood.
You really believe what you say?
Brotherhood people.
You
Brotherhood
really believe what you say?
Members. Excuse me. Brotherhood members. Attack people in the streets.
We overcome this
opposition. Attack also opposition parts, killing people near to the presidency palace.
How many?
During Morsi. So they are talking about democracy to use people. Now, when the people of Egypt vote today for this constitution, they said we reject the parties based on religion. We reject as Egyptians parties based on religion. We refuse them. No more brotherhood in Egypt. Right, no more at all.
Let me bring in Eugene Rogan on this. Eugene, this notion in Algeria, they call it le pouvoir, the power. In Egypt, the deep state, is it a conspiracy or is there really such a thing?
I think rather than talking about conspiracies, you just look at the realities. And the reality is, since 1952, the military has entrenched its power over the politics of Egypt in a way that simply was not true in Tunisia. The pouvoir in Tunisia was closely linked to the Interior Ministry, which is where Ben Ali himself hailed from. And after the revolution in Tunisia, the Ministry of Interior really did melt down. And I think Tunisia stands as an extraordinary example of a country that since 2011 has gone through terrible crises. But they have been engaged in a process, and they have taken the revolution to try and move towards political transformation of their country. And as they move towards a constitution, the document that will be put to Tunisians for a vote reflects a very long period of deliberation, a process in which there have been very important compromises made between the Islamist and Nahda party, the secular parties, secular and Islamist parties being more or less balanced in Tunisia. And I think that what will result is a constitution that enshrines the most liberal values of any country in the Arab world. In a sense, what's gone on in Egypt has been a failure for the constitutional process to bring about meaningful institutional change in Egypt that would privilege the rule of law, privilege citizenship rights over the power of the military. And that's the goal of 2011. That has failed.
Let me ask you, because as you're saying, over in Tunisia, lawmakers, they're still voting on that new constitution. They were unable to finish before Tuesday's third anniversary of the toppling of Ben Ali. But they're 2/3 of the way through. The process fractious, often delayed, at times bloody. But there is this clear electoral roadmap. A lot of people thinking that what's going on inside of Tunisia now, the sort of breakthrough we've had on political gridlock, is partly due to worries over Egypt.
I have no doubt that the example of Egypt's coup in the summer, and I will call it a coup along with the other speakers who have found the military's means of overturning a democratically elected leader, conforms to a coup. You know, whatever we say about Egypt's route, it has been fundamentally different, and it has taken away the process that has really characterized Tunisia's institutional and political change.
So, can I ask him a question?
Sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask Mr. Jean a question?
Go ahead.
Because I totally agree with what he said. Mr. Jean, I'm sorry to ask you this question, but can you call this regime today a military regime, a minister of defense, which ousted a president and put him into jail, take over the Egypt's control as a process to democracy? Can you call this democracy? Because if it exists in the UK, I will agree 100%. I lived in the UK and I saw how it's 100% democracy. I am asking you, if today do you see this controlling this country, banning the opposition, putting a cheap propaganda of democracy today, can you call this a democracy or a process or a step, even a small step of democracy?
You know, in answering your question, I have to declare I lived in Egypt for 3 years. I finished high school there. And I feel very deeply bound to Egypt, and I had hoped for more. I don't think that the word democracy really has much power or resonance for average Egyptians. They simply do not believe that it is democracy that's going to deliver for them. And so, you know, in a sense, what I would like to see for Egypt, rather than talk about is this democracy or not, is can Egypt move towards a situation in which the
military has never been in any democratic process in the world. That's why I always says, okay, these people are good, but on the borderlines. And you will agree with me by saying, today, if we want democracy, we have
you insisted to get the answer you need from Eugene. Let him talk. Anyway, I noticed there is a great anger from the Egyptian army.
This guy,
not this guy. My name is Mohamed Elalfy. Not this guy. My name is Mohamed Elalfy, and I'm respecting. You have to respect it too. I noticed there is a great anger from the Egyptian army. Of course, when you will try, when the people go to revolution, 30 millions in the streets to ask the demand from the leaders to terminate the criminals from the presidency palace must be obey the nation, must be obey the people. But
let's go for
all people. When you say
one at a time, please.
When you said the problem is not constitution, but you said the problem is the army behind the constitution.
Yes.
Now you are calling for. Now you are calling for people to work against the army, and I think that is not.
I said army has nothing to do with politics.
Because the anger, I'll answer you frankly.
I want to get back to Eugene.
Just one point. Point. Excuse me, seconds. The anger from the Egyptian army, because the Egyptian army break up all the plans planned outside Egypt to transfer Egypt to Syria, to Syrian situation
Really?
and Iraq
Really?
situation. Yes.
1,500 people died.
Muslims Brotherhood was betraying the country.
All right, I want to get back to Eugene Rogan. Eugene Rogan, you were saying that. What is your hope, Eugene Rogan? We were with your train of thought there. What is your hope for where Egypt will go?
Well, the point I was trying to make very briefly is that because I don't believe people have a great deal of confidence in the idea of democracy, I don't think that that holds much power over the average voter of Egypt. Certainly for many democracy activists, it's everything. But my hope for Egypt is that the country can move towards a system where the rule of law will be privileged and the rights of citizens will be protected. And what worries me most about the turn that has taken since the July 3 coup and with today's referendum is that we're seeing a system in which the president...
It was a revolution, my friend. It was a revolution.
1 second.
Not a coup, my friend. It was a revolution.
Please.
30 million in the
Mr.
streets.
Eugene,
30 million
this
is not a
Mr.
coup,
he
my
knows
friend.
what democracy means.
30
He
million
doesn't want democracy
excuse
in
me.
Egypt.
Gentlemen, please,
Okay.
one at a time. Eugene Rogan.
Well, I mean, I think I made my point. And I feel that the problem with the Constitution today is that by privileging the powers of the military, of the police, and of the judiciary, that we run the risk of seeing Mohamed, who, as you may remember, was the young man arbitrarily beaten to death by the police before the outbreak of the revolution in 2011. It's precisely to move away from the arbitrary exercise of power, the respect for the rule of law, and the protection of citizens under the state that I hope for all Egyptians because of my love for your country.
Yasmin Farouk, let me bring you in at this point. Right now, we've said, we've talked throughout this discussion about what exactly Egyptians were voting about, what was motivating them to go to the polls or to stay away from the polls. In your view, what is it possible that in Egypt, anytime soon, there will be an aspiration to have Western-style democracy?
Why Western-style democracy? I mean, just democracy, just as Professor, as Eugene said, have a country where you have a rule of law, where the freedoms and rights of people are respected, be it through democracy, be it through any other system of government, be it through an Egyptian-born democracy that would take a decade or 10 to 15 years to be born, fine, just let the process take its time. I mean, personally, since you asked me my view, I never expected the political transition to go smoothly. I never expected it to take a couple of years or 3 years. I mean, this regime, this political system that was built since 1952. The Mubarak regime by itself, not to talk about Sadat or Nasser, stayed for 30 years. How could you expect it to be transformed into democracy in 2 to 3 years with this level of political education and non-existent political education, non-existent political culture? It will take years. And excuse me, but I mean, because your guest was saying that it is more difficult right now for the 2013 constitution than 2012, because right now you have the whole system who is with those who are ruling right now. This is what the Brotherhood tried to do in 2012. They tried to write a constitution while compromising with the militaries, with the Ministry of Interior, and with the judiciary, of course. But their judiciary was rebellious. So it will take time. And no, I am not. Maybe I'm just naive or something. But it will take not less than a whole generation before we see the rule of law, before we see the Ministry of Interior curbed, before we see the militaries reduced to their role in defense, actually, and out of politics. And just to highlight one point, since I said
very briefly,
at the beginning of this interview, yes, very briefly, and the point that I already mentioned previously on France 24, I have worked with the government of Hisham Andil under the Brotherhood. We, in some kind or in some way, we needed the intervention of the militaries. They were the ones who held these institutions from falling down, who prevented actually violence, the mounting violence in the streets of Cairo. But now, how can we curb the militaries? How can we reduce the role progressively in politics and economics? Now, this is what is at stake.
All right, and one final comment, which is from one of the viewers, Black Mamba, saying, democracy is always messy and uncertain. I want to thank Yasmin Farouk in Cairo, Eugene Rogan in Oxford. I also want to thank Mohamed Elalfy and Moayad Harb for this spirited discussion. More to come on Egypt at the top of the hour and in future news bulletins right here on France 24.